Okay, this is Jeffrey, and it looks like a pretty well fleshed out set. Guess these are things that were sliced with the sword. Um, yeah, the over the shoulder shot is good. And yeah, I think, I mean, it's pretty well built. I think it might be good to just think of other objects you might find in this kind of space. It's just looking a little bit sparse and a little bit too kind of geometrically perfect. You might want to find ways to show some aging or damage to either the surfaces or the textures. Let's take a look at mine. So for your referencing questions, I'm just going to look in the reference editor. I don't know why you have so many different things referenced into this scene. Really, it should be everything in one scene, and then the character should be referenced in. So there should just be one thing showing up, but it looks like you have sort of references within references. That's just really complicated. So what I would do is, for everything but the character, you know, just do select and do File, import objects from reference, and then save the scene with everything together in one scene, and then reference, and have the character reference in. But the stuff shouldn't be all separated out. And then your question about how do you hide or delete things, once you do import objects from reference, so you can do whatever you want that you would normally be able to do, like a delete an object. Um, don't know why this texture isn't showing up. Um, it's just a different project, so everything should be in the same project folder. Um, and then you won't have problems like this, like opening, having to relink textures and stuff like that. Maybe if this was, these edges were a little rounded, maybe not quite so sliced. Although I think the other thing is, if you're, a different texture on top, then that looks more like the end of bits of straw. This might help, maybe like a lighter color, a bit of a different look to the sliced things might make it more read as something that's been sliced up. Maybe it's hollow even, I don't know, or it's or but either way, like I said, you wanted to see the frayed ends of the straw and maybe not such a clean edge there. I like that you have these kinds of objects in here. This is the kind of thing that helps flesh out the scene a little bit, and it'd be great to have more, I don't know, things like that, but the wood textures are looking good. So overall, I think this is a good usable space. I think a little bit more of textures. Get your scene organized so everything on the set is in one file. It's all the objects are imported from reference, and then reference in your character, as mentioned before. Oh, and regarding your question of using the sword as a walking cane, you can simply parent the sword to the hand control curve, and then it should move with a hand. I think it's very important that you use, if you're going to be using the arm as a, let's open up your character real quick. So I just wanted to point out, if you are going to use this as a walking, it's very important that the hand is able to stick, which is going to be nearly impossible in FK mode. So it's a little bit hidden here, but here's the little IK/FK switch thing. So I'm just going to grab that and switch this to IK, and then I'll have to reposition the arm. And I might even make this guy, whoops, something like that. Okay. So, get it positioned. I'm not going to spend all day making this perfect, but anyways, pretend that's properly positioned. And then we'll take this sword, and that's child, P for parent, P, and now that should move around with that wherever it goes. So the other thing is that, when, let's say you've planted this arm on the ground, and then the character moves, like so, it'll stay planted. And if you see how this other arms, it is in FK mode, just imagine for a moment like you had a sword or something in this hand, and look at how when I move the character, just to compare the two arms, that arm doesn't stick. And once it reaches beyond its the full length of the arm, it's going to pull. But as long as you don't do that, the arm will stick, and so that way that can stay planted on the ground, and the character can move and walk. And so you can plant the sword and then move forward, and plant the sword and move forward as the character walks, or whatever you're going to do with him. This is a good time to remind you. I sent you guys a message, but this control right here, this circle at the feet, this main control, this is just to place the character at the beginning of the shot, and then after that you'll move the character with this, and you'll move the feet. Like so, and you could even move those together to move the character around. But what you won't do is you won't animate this to move the character around that main control. Do not animate that main control to animate the character. You can use it to place him at the starting point in the scene, but don't use this control to animate the character. I can't stress that enough. Okay, this is Catherine, and it's a good shot. That's coming along well. And seen from above. I like the wood texture on the floor. And the staircase is interesting. The stair texture is very obviously repeating, so you might want to alter that, especially when you see it from this angle. It becomes kind of obvious. So I think it would be easy to kind of texture a few books and then start populating these shelves with some books and other objects. I think the texture images you've chosen are good. I would argue that these bricks look a little bit on the big side. Control A for attribute editor. I'll look at the texture, go over here, and let's look at the place 2D texture node. See if 1.2 by 2. Let's try to double that then. To me, to my eye, that looks like a more believable scale for this character, or maybe somewhere in between. For these things, as I mentioned, you can see it's very obviously, using the same texture for each of these. But what we could do, one approach, let's take this, just isolate this for a moment, and just shift double click, shift double click, shift double click, and just select these. So we've got that whole top selected, and let's just look side by side and look. So isolate that again, and look in the UV editor. So I'm just kind of cheating here a little bit, and I can take something like this and just move it. Well, I guess I might be screwing up some of the other ones by doing that, but see, this might be stretching out some of the other ones. But I could also like cut here and cut. Oh, is that? Oh, that's why that looks weird. And then cut there. And then take the whole shell, and I can move it wherever, right? And then if we go back, I've got some variation in my staircase now. I mean, it looks like it's from the same wood, but at least it's not that exact same bit over and over again, right? So you could do that with a few more of the steps to guess, just so it doesn't look repeated so much. I might choose a different top for that. That wood texture looks a little out of place for this kind of piece of furniture. Yeah, and then this couch, what's up with this texture? It just looks like it's repeated too much. Um, it's Alt Shift D to delete history. And yeah, 11 by 11. What about 2 by 2 or something? 1 by 1. Oops. I mean, to me, to my eye, well, maybe 2 by 2. Let's see. Um, why is it? It's just one big shell. Hmm. Well, you might need to, just shift this around. I might cut some of these. Again, it's very similar to what I just did. And then to grab that shell, it's almost exactly what I just did. Hey, oh, there we go. And then because you're putting everything right on that seam in this thing, so and now I've got something without a big seam in it, and it looks all right now, and that kind of grain of that texture looks believable, whereas the rest of this looks very weird and repeated, and you've repeated it so much, and there's all these little seams in the texture. So reduce the UV repeat and then adjust the position of your shells so that they're not sitting on a seam if you do. Because it looked like one was not enough repeat, but then you had a big seam down the middle, so you need to get stuff out of the way of that seam. And then you could very quickly fix up these different couch cushions. So yeah, it's a good start. I think it's a very usable. Oh, oh yeah. Is this your reference image? Oh, that's good. Just got to get those books or other objects on the shelves and a couple other props, a couple little texture fixes, and maybe think about lighting sources, and you have a pretty good scene. Maybe some stuff on the walls that look a little bit. The brick looks a little bit too monolithic. Maybe breaking it up with some photos hung from the wall. I mentioned light fixtures, maybe other more kind of utilitarian-looking things like power outlets or wiring pipes, those kinds of things. This is Gordon. You mentioned the smoke in the area caused you some problem. If you want to resubmit this, after you've had more time on it, you can certainly, earn a better grade if you're able to improve it significantly. And you won't be penalized considering the fires interfered with your work. So, anyway, yeah, I think the basic idea looks like sort of a spaceship type environment. It's a good idea. Obviously, the camera's not going to work from that angle because, it just you sort of imagine that here you can imagine that the set can go on in all directions, but there that last one sort of reveals the limitations of it. So I don't think a shot like that would work. When I open the scene file in Maya, it looks like you don't have your scene file in your scenes folder. So you should have a Maya project with a scenes folder and a source images folder, and you should have your scenes in the scenes folder and your source images in the source images folder. To create a Maya project, you do file, project window, and you can make a new project and give it a name and browse to the directory you want to put it in, and then it will automatically create all these subfolders, and you put your scenes into the scenes folder, your source images in the source images folder. This set for some reason is one big combined mesh, and that's going to most likely get in your way quite a bit. Imagine, for example, trying to do this UV map. Like, how would you? It's certainly possible, but it's just making everything more difficult. So there's no reason to combine those objects. So I'm just separating them, and now you can see, you have all these separate things which could realistically have their own texture. So I think it's it's a good start for a set. And I think you could maybe add some props so that it's not so kind of empty and barren, and maybe there's other things on these objects or walls, little control panels, or wiring, vents, these kinds of things that make it look more real and give it a sense of scale compared to the character. If there's certain things we can recognize that give us a sense of scale, that's always really helpful. So yeah, I would say good start. Get some texture on these things and flesh it out a little bit, and it could be a good set to use. Okay, this is Craig, and it's sort of a weird composition because he's hidden by the chair, but yeah, I think it's a good set. I particularly like this shot. I think that looks really nice. But there's definitely room to move around and do different things with the character in this set. It looks very nicely and carefully built. Um, I'm just looking at shapes like these, which seem to work pretty well, and I can see you got the bevel on there, which is a good touch. And so really the big thing is getting some textures on these surfaces, because it looks like you don't have any yet unless somehow they're not linked, but no, it's just gray. So yes, that's the big thing, is getting some texture on the surfaces, and maybe you can use those textures to put extra little details. Maybe there's little buttons or readouts in various spots that could be interesting. So yeah, well modeled. Just take it to the next step. If you absolutely don't have the time to texture it, at the very least add some colors to it so it's not just the default gray, but hopefully you can texture it. Okay, this is Taylor, and yeah, I like how kind of fleshed out this set is. You've got plenty of little props of books, little throw pillows, the shoes, coffee cup, paintings on the wall. That's all good. Yeah, I think yeah, that looks, the camera angles look good, except I think you're a little bit hemmed in by the size of the set. So let's take a look. Yeah, I'm just concerned that it's a little bit tight, and it might be a question of, for example, if this floor, kind of came out a lot further. Obviously, it's getting stretched out, but and then these walls too. Already all of a sudden you know what I mean. You've got shots like this now where you have a little bit of room to move. Whereas I think when when you're here, you're already you're already cropping all that stuff out just to fit it in. So just might want to extend things out a little bit, maybe taller ceilings as well. So just really making the walls and floor bigger, I think, is going to give you more room. You might want to think about what you want outside the window, some kind of outdoor scene maybe, or maybe you're just seeing another apartment building across the street, something like that. It's good that you've got all this different furniture built. It's looking good. I think the texture repeat is there's way too, these are just way too big here. So I would look at the place 2D texture thing here. Maybe go, I don't know, let's see, 8x8 or something. Yeah, see, that's already looking a lot better. Maybe more, 12x12. Maybe that's probably a little bit more to scale. So that's looking much better. You might have to, well, you're not going to see that edge anyway. And what else? Any other sort of texture images, issues? Not really. So yeah, it's coming along. I think, if you want to, I think these could use some kind of texture and maybe some little glass panes in there, so that's not empty. And that can be kind of a reflective surface, like a little glass shader on there. Maybe a little something on this wall too, whether it's another window or another painting, could be helpful because it's looking a little empty compared to everything else. But yeah, I think this will work well. Oh, also you mentioned getting the character back to the original stance in your advanced skeleton tools. You can open this up and you should be able to do pose reset. Is that working? Oh, it's also resizing her. So there's not any options there. No, there's not. So yeah, then I guess you'd have to once again scale her up to the appropriate size. The other choice you have is to take all of this stuff. If that's problematic for any reason, you could take your full set everything, group it. I'm just going to select hierarchy, which is select everything in the hierarchy and delete history off of all of that stuff. Just make sure you don't do that on the character or the wriggle break. And then once I've done that, I could take that whole group and, for example, what's that? Oh yeah. I can scale the set down to the character as the other, so you don't, if one or the other is causing problems, you can do it the other way. So whatever, you think the proportions are, but that's just another approach. Rather than scaling the character to the set, you can scale the set to the character. Either way works. Okay, this is Danya, and yeah, this is coming along. The size of this texture is much too big for this wall, and I would argue similarly for this. For your surfaces, it's good to put at least a little bit of a bevel in there, so you don't get those sort of super geometrically sharp corners. The proportion of the thickness of this bookshelf the shelves look extremely thick compared to the character and everything else in the scene, so I might kind of reconsider that and work the shape of that a little bit. Let's take a look at the first thing that I notice is the Maya scene doesn't appear to be in a scenes directory. So I notice you have a source images folder, but for some reason the scene is saved in the source images folder, and the scene should be saved in the scenes folder, and the source images should be saved in the source images folder. I don't appear to have this texture. So yeah, when I look at this desktop blah 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 blah, see I can see that this is not in your source images directory. So your texture images should be in the source images directory of a Maya project, folder, and your scenes file should be in the scenes directory of the Maya project folder. If you need to create a Maya project folder, you can go to File, Project Window, New, and then give it a name, browse to where you want it to be, and it'll create all these default subfolders, one of which is the scenes folder where you should put your scenes file, the other is the source images folder where you should put all your texture images. So I can browse for this. Gray concrete wall. As an example, and then for this, for some reason you're doing a 3D projection for this, which I probably is not what I would most likely do, but anyway, I'm scaling that down. I can see you might have scaled it up so you don't see the repeat, but the problem is it's just too big, so you might want to find a different one, or you'd have to sort of turn this into a seamless texture, which is going to be a little bit difficult. Just because of the nature of these kind of patterns on here, but I can kind of show you real. So to make this seamless, you need to make the top edge match the bottom and the left match the right. So let me just see how big this is real quick. 2048 by 1536. So let's do filter other offset by 1024. And that'll see I can see that seam down the middle, and I could try to just sort of grab this area here and do was it Shift F5 content aware fill. See how that does, if that did a decent job for me. It's okay. I don't see too obvious as a seam. You could also S for the rubber stamp tool. Alt right mouse click and drag to make a bigger brush, and maybe just grab from over here, and just to make sure there's no spot where you can see that, and then filter other offset, and maybe it's vertical, I don't know, 750 about, similar thing, M for marquee select, Shift F5 for content aware fill. It's taking its time. And then again, maybe just touch it up with the rubber stamp tool. Now, I'm saving that. That will, let's refresh now the, reload the file. So there's no obvious line scenes, but your eyes will catch the repeating pattern in there. But you can see at least you're getting away with it a little bit better. I mean, obviously, if you go out, it looks like a clearly repeating pattern, but at least you don't see the scene line. And so, like when I'm this close, I'm sort of like, oh yeah, as long as I'm not looking too closely at the wall, I might be able to get away with a repeating pattern like that, as long as we don't see the seams. But yeah, I think a lot of these other objects need a texture rather than just a color. Make sure you're putting this stuff in the project folder. Maybe adjust the UV repeat of something like this. Is there a UV 2D texture placement? Why am I seeing all this stuff? I'm just going to go into the hypershade and take a look at this. Oh, you have a place 3D texture node for this too. Interesting. I probably wouldn't have done that. But oh yeah, okay. So it's projecting from up there. So yeah, I just might, I don't know, maybe more like that. They just looked really, really big. Those checker squares. So yeah, more textures, work on the kind of scale of repeat, get more things textured, bevel your edges, and maybe think about some lighting sources, light fixtures and or windows, and yeah, keep moving forward. Okay, this is Gwen. Yeah, I think the wood texture is looking nice. Not sure what we're looking at here. Maybe it'll be more obvious in the Maya scene file. Let me take a look. Okay, whoops. So I guess that's I guess that's supposed to be a foggy sunlit background. I might try a different image. That's not really working for me. It looks kind of weird when seen through here. We're not getting a sense of depth though. So maybe try a different forest scene because it just looks so like just something abstract and odd. Yeah, you've got some room to stand up there. I think obviously the floor should have a texture. These wood things should have a texture. It'd be great to get a texture on this wood burning stove as well. So yeah, I guess I would say in general it's a good start. You just need to keep going. It's just looking pretty unfinished with a lot of untextured objects, and maybe you need a few more props and details to kind of flesh out the world a little bit. But again, yeah, good start for the basic structure, but just keep going. This is Josh, and yeah, this is coming along really well. I like the look of the textures. You got a sort of a cartoony-ish style, sort of Fortnite-ish look to the surfaces. Looks like you had some fun with the grass. That's probably has something to do with the large file size. Make sure you're using file archive scene and send me that zip folder. And it really shouldn't be that big. But yeah, there's just a real good look to this. I think maybe try something a little different with this wood texture here, just because of the wood grain looks too large and looks a little odd in that. Oh yeah, the lighting looks cool. That really brings it to life in a nice way. That's good. Alright, yeah, I mean, I think obviously I don't have the Maya file to look at in comparison, so I can't comment more detail on that, but I think good sorts of different shots, and it's great you're already playing with lighting, nice consistent looking textures. Yeah, overall, I think this looks pretty good. It could be a good set to work with. One thing to think about is the scale of the grass compared to the size of the character is quite big. Not to say you couldn't have grass that big or a character that small, but it's just something to think about. How big is the character compared to the grass? Okay, this is Flora, and yeah, this is coming along. There's a lot of detail in here, a lot of nice props. Looks like you did a nice job kind of modeling these candles, a lot of detail there, and the different textures are looking good. I think when you're just as a presentation thing, I think I would hide really everything besides the polygons. Like you don't want these curves or these texture placement nodes showing up when you're trying to show off your scene. Yeah, it's looking good. You got all those books on the shelf, all the various objects on the tables. These table legs look maybe a little thick, maybe a little lacking detail. Maybe consider doing a little bit more with those. Look at some reference to just, yeah, I just think that furniture looks a little bit too thick and blocky and simple. And so you might want to A, give it more detail, B, show some kind of wear and tear so it's a little less perfect. Maybe make sure the edges are beveled and maybe kind of just add some imperfections. Here we are on the My file, and yeah, it's looking good. Like the candles, I think those will work good from a distance. Other props looking good, well made. Yeah, so really it's a good scene. I think you might find yourself a little bit tight with the camera, so you could do something as simple as taking these and scaling them. You might have to fix the texture and stuff for there, but just doing maybe even the top. And so you may have to adjust the UV map of the texture, but even there, so now I just have that much more kind of wiggle room. Maybe you want to raise the height of the ceiling as well. Just whoops. If I do B for soft select and just why is it picking the bottom one? Is it because of symmetry? Just kind of stretching that out. Anyway, my point is you can raise the walls and the ceiling, and so that you have a little bit more room to. Maybe it should be just scaled proportionally and not stretched like that, because I think that's going to distort the texture a whole bunch. So the point is you'll just have a little bit once you increase the size of all these things. You'll have a little bit more room to work in to move the camera around, and I guess make sure that this is still on the ceiling. But you see what I mean? Like you can go a little wider and still keep everything in there just by increasing the size of the walls. So yeah, I think this is a really good job. You've done a lot. I think the big thing that's kind of catching my eye is the sort of simplicity and kind of blockiness of some of this furniture. Maybe some more interesting legs on those. Maybe something with a texture on those. But besides that, it's looking really good. Maybe some windows or other light sources would be really helpful to have in the scene to help justify the lighting that you do. And regarding the eyeball, I really think you have to step back to a working version of your character, like a previously saved version, even if that means going back to the fit skeleton or something like that, and then step forward from there to fix the eye.